365 days. That's the number of days in a year. Sure, 2024 is a leap year, and thus we have February the 29th being day 366, but that's just another room to me. In 2024, I decided to take on a challenge, designing a mega dungeon, with a room for each day on the calendar. Welcome, mates, to the design floor for 2024. In our first episode, we established the routes for the mega dungeon, deep in a would-be completely uncharted desert. Our party becomes part of the expedition sent out to explore, and is tasked with searching the main fortress in the abandoned city of Valdereim. We detailed out the base camp for the expedition, as well as several maps or rooms that would take the party to the entrance for the mega dungeon itself. We finished off January with a prototype initial idea system for countering designer block when tackling future rooms. With January behind us and the mega dungeon in front of the party, we should talk about the city of Valdereim itself, specifically some of the background lore and the architecture. Between the undead, the constructs which don't recover health between fights, and the rubble, players might be able to surmise that Valdereim had been sieged by the undead at some point in its ancient past. As we explore the main castle, we'll begin to unearth some of the history that has led to Valdereim being abandoned. Speaking of architecture, the town buildings generally follow a simple architectural style, consisting of sandstone stonework with slanted roof slabs, and somewhat decayed but still functional doors made out of planks of acacia wood. And now we move on to the central castle for Valdereim and its fortifications. A massive stone structure, which instead consists for the most part of a mixture of red chert stone bricks and arcane reinforced sandstone. Those who inspect the reinforced sandstone could discover that the arcane treatment involved the use of a lot of enchanted topaz dust, so loose bricks would be considerably valuable to the expedition. Moreover, the crenellations atop the castle fortifications and walls are lined with some black basalt stone. With all of that, let's get into what February added to the mega dungeon. Our 32nd room, and first for February, details the most easily accessible entrance to the mega dungeon proper, a broken section of the wall situated between two of the fort's collapsed towers. This is our party's first hint as to the historical events that took place here at the castle itself, a siege of the city which ultimately led to its downfall and being subsequently abandoned. Amongst the chert and sandstone rubble, the party can identify several large rocks lying amongst the rubble with a very different strata, as the different boulders are granites, not too dissimilar to the granite that can be found in the mountain ranges on the outskirts of the desert. However, as the party approaches this section of the walls, a few animated suits of armor rise from the rubble to confront the party, intending more to stop them from infiltrating further. If the party retreats, the animated armor doesn't regain any hit points, and will also not pursue the players. We'll talk more about the reasons why this happens as we begin to explore the castle itself. From here, the castle grounds open up and the party can gain access to the individual towers which are still standing. Since there are a lot of choices on where they could go, we do have to make an assumption about how the party might explore the castle grounds in order to give us the direction we need to design more rooms. So for conjuring the next set of rooms, we're going to assume the party is going to travel around the castle grounds in a clockwise manner before heading towards the entrance of the castle and entering. The first of the intact towers on our clockwise trip around the central castle brings the party to the Tower of the Blight. Each of these towers have their name etched into basalt stone plaques that are adjacent on the walls to the doors where characters could enter and exit. The Tower of the Blight itself is constantly surrounded by an arcane ward which causes a feeling of dread in those who approach its exterior, as though it were some sort of intense warning that the tower probably shouldn't be entered. The double doors for the entrance to the Tower of the Blight is mostly unremarkable, aside from the engraved simple depiction of a skull, painted with red ochre. Definitely not ominous or suspicious in the slightest. The second tower we arrive at for the 34th room is the aptly named Tower of Shadows. As the party gets closer to this tower, they might notice how they each seem to be in perpetual, calming shade, as though the tower itself was always casting a shadow over each character. Those that succeed in Arcana check can determine that the arcane ward around this tower employs illusions to create the shade effect, although it seemingly has no other purpose. Oddly enough, the base of this tower and one other tower are constructed out of an additional different type of stone when compared to the other towers. Black basalt bricks line several of the major junctions in the stonework. Moreover, the engravings in the double doors for this tower convey a visual depiction of a man standing in the sun, burning into ash, whilst those that remain in the shadows are untouched. The third tower on our route is the Tower of Air. This tower's construction, unlike the other towers, is built such that the arrangement of chert and sandstone bricks resemble a cascading series of spirals. Those who stand within 10 feet of the tower have to make a constitution saving throw to avoid being deafened by the constant loud wind surrounding the tower. The deafening effect as a result of failing the save dissipates if they move away from or approach the doors of the tower itself. Kind of like how the eye of a hurricane is considered peaceful, except this cyclone isn't a destructive force. And since we have a theme going for the doors to each tower having depictions, the Tower of Air has an excessive amount of crisscrossing wavy lines etched into its doors. The fourth tower we're drawing the outskirt map for is the Tower of Water. If the party is getting tired of the desert heat, they'll be pleased to know that this tower is surrounded by a cooling aura that makes even the most unbearable hours of the desert a nice and calming experience. The tower has a constant waterfall on all sides where characters could acquire surprisingly cold water. The doors for this tower are made out of coloured glass instead of the usual stone, and convey a depiction of a water elemental holding a sandcastle whilst at an oasis. The stone relief around the doors parts the water away to allow people to enter without also getting soaked. Our second last tower is the Tower of Nature. The standout feature here which differentiates this tower is a small vegetable patch which, unlike the abandoned farmland for the farmhouses that Valdereim has, is still growing fresh carrots and cabbages, which can indeed be harvested and taste like regular carrots and cabbages. You can optionally include an Easter egg here in the form of a wheel cart behind the tower, which has a paper note which reads, "Not my cabbages," in an old form of common. The tower's base stonework contains engravings where vines, flowers and leaves are depicted in chaotic patterns, even across the doors of the tower itself. The tower's base stonework contains engravings where vines, flowers and leaves are depicted in chaotic patterns, even across the doors for the tower itself. The last tower, Room 38, is the second tower to feature black basalt stone in the stonework for the base of the tower. This is the Tower of the Volcano, and every slab of basalt is hot to the touch, but not to the point where characters have to make saving throws to avoid taking damage. There is also an abundance of dry heat surrounding this tower, like that which could be reasonably expected when in the vicinity of an active volcano which is spewing forth lava. And the arrangement of the basalt, chert and sandstone bricks for the tower resemble as such. With all of these towers noted down, we now move on to the castle itself, or rather the outskirts of the castle. The castle's main discerning features are the four large cylindrical towers for the corners, and the slightly downward slanted main walls. The walls themselves consist of a mix of chert and reinforced sandstone common to the 6 intact towers. The doors for the castle are massive basalt slabs relieved with a pattern of chert. Above the doorframe is a gargoyle head, although it has been worn down by the passage of time. Around the back of the castle, there is a much smaller singular door, however the passage of time has rendered the would-be alternative entrance inaccessible. No sneaking in through the back door, unfortunately. For the 40th room, we combine the maps for the outskirts of the towers along with the castle grounds and the wrecked section of wall from where we started exploration of the castle. Now, my original plan at this point was to flesh out some of the towers a bit more, since it was at this moment that it occurred to me that I had messed up the original scaling. Whoops. However, since one of the central themes of the Mega Dungeon is centered around ancient interpretations of magic and its applications, it becomes something that we can later play around with when I revisit each of the towers in the upcoming months. For now, we have the ground floor of the castle to detail out with the remaining rooms for February. The first room of the castle as we enter through the front door is the entrance foyer, which has more doors for the players to open up and explore. There is a badly torn up carpet on the ground leading from each of the doors, in addition to a few ruined armoured stands with decayed wood and long since rusted out metal armour. It might take some effort to identify that the alloy used for the armor suits is some kind of bronze. The doors directly opposite the entrance doors is a highly elaborated etched set of doors which can be revealed through a history check or otherwise be presumed to lead to the throne room. There are also some stone benches besides the throne room doors. If our party were to head through the door on the left, they are greeted by a corridor which leads to one of the corner towers of the castle. This room has a few statues made out of red chert stone, each of which depict armoured knights holding their greatsword vertically downward in front of them. An entirely optional combat encounter here would be to have one of the statues animate to confront the intruders. If the party headed through the doors on the right instead, they'd be facing a similar enough corridor, except the statues here lining this particular corridor have been completely smashed into being little more than rubble. No ambushes await the party in this corridor, unless your DM wants to add some extra challenge for the party. Speaking of our throne room, the elaborate double doors leading from the entrance foyer open outwards into the throne room to reveal a widely spaced room, with 3 more door sets on the opposing walls, as well as 1 more on the left set of walls. Surrounding the central door set is a pair of stairs which half-spiral upwards towards the balcony upon which the throne itself is located. It is noted that I only did the ground floor portion of this room for some reason, with the plan to eventually return when detailing out the rest of the castle floors later. Speaking of detailing, this room does have a few animated suits of armour that are for the moment collapsed on the ground. However, if the party makes too much noise, such as from opening the central door set beneath the throne balcony, they will begin to get up from the ground and engage the party in combat. Some of these animated armor suits will be carrying crossbows and rusted halberds, which the party could loot ahead of time to make the fight easier if they're stealthy enough. These suits are triggered by sound, but not necessarily touch or sight. So, what's behind the central set of doors beneath the balcony, and who made these particular doors as loud as all get out? I decided to save that for the last room of February. For room 45, if the party goes through the set of doors on the right as seen from the throne room's entrance for the foyer, yeah, I apologise if anyone else is feeling disoriented whilst watching this and listening to the directions leading to each room. I'm informed that open-ended exploration is sometimes like that. Anyway, this room has anvils, casting tables, and forges in it, although the anvils have rusted pretty extensively. A stone plaque on the wall reads Metal Workshop in Ancient Common, and there are a few hammers and tongs lying on the ground, seemingly just left there. On the right is a door labelled Metal Storage. Proceeding through the door marked with Metal Storage, the party will find a room containing 5 locked chests, a granite table with a few rusted metal ingots, and several racks. Some of these racks have hardened clay molds intended for casting metals such as copper or bronze alloys. 2 of the locked chests in the room are actually hostile mimics, safeguarding some enchanted weapons which haven't rusted out due to their infusion of magic. Going through the other unexplored door from the Metal Workshop, we have one of the armories for the castle. This room features several armor stands that were once occupied by armor, unsurprisingly. On the walls are several racks for storing swords and spears. However, hidden behind one of the racks is an ornate-looking halberd that is in pristine condition. Unfortunately, this halberd is also cursed. Picking up the halberd will result in a ghostly apparition appearing, which will attempt to wrestle the halberd out of the character's hands. You'll have to win 3 consecutive athletics or strength checks against it for the apparition to dissipate and the curse to be lifted. Exiting the ground floor armory through its back door leads the party to a corridor which connects the armory to the 2 rear towers, the would-be rear exit to the castle if that section wasn't collapsed, and a 5th door. The decor in this corridor is much less elaborate when compared to the other corridors, but it still has a central display stand with a human skull with a melted candle on top. You know, just in case the castle wasn't ominous enough already. Taking that 5th door which doesn't lead to either of the connected towers will bring the party into a room full of barrels. A plaque on the wall in this room reads Fermentation Room, but considering that the barrels have been here for quite a long time, it's ill-advised to attempt to drink the contents of the barrels. The next room the party would venture into from the fermentation room is another room full of barrels, but this one also has racks full of crocks. Moreover, the temperature in this room is noticeably colder than the surrounding rooms. Those who investigate will find several arcane runes on the rim of the ceiling, which are responsible for cooling this room down. Unfortunately, they are not designed to filtrate the air, and thus if any of the crocks or barrels are opened, the party will be greeted by the smell of rotted food. Naturally, there is a plaque on the wall which says Food Storage. From the food storage room, we arrive in the kitchen. The kitchen contains a number of benches intended for the preparation of food. Some of the benches support clay ovens that were once used for baking bread and pies. There are also 3 skeletons in the room that will tangle with the party if anyone begins to seriously inspect the utensils and other cooking equipment. Even in death, the former cooks are protective of their stuff. Connected to the kitchen is the dining hall. And unlike the rest of the castle, this room looks as though it's actually functional for its intended purpose. The silverware on the table is polished, the candelabras have candles that are lit and flicker softly, and there is a freshly baked pie on a dish in the center of the table. Of course, it's an illusion, being maintained by an amulet which is hanging on a statue off to the side. The room also has a ghost in it that is willing to talk to the party. This ghost belongs to the butler, a dwarf who goes by the name of Kensingway Silverstone. He is polite and well-mannered, but outside of his name, he only talks about how the pie is perfect for the Queen's dinner this evening. He won't even acknowledge anything the party has to say with regards to the ruined state of the castle. Taking the amulet on the statue will immediately drop the entire illusion over the room, revealing the table in the center of the room is broken. There was no silverware in the room, and the candles were never there. The amulet can be identified as an amulet of echoing history, and it allows the holder to speak with the dead. Not just through the Speak with Dead spell, although the amulet does allow the holder to be able to cast and recast that spell as will, although that function requires attunement. This amulet can also be placed on any object in the castle grounds which has been echo-touched, to reveal a vision to the party, much like the statue in this room. The holder is also able to see when any object is echo-touched in a similar manner. So, what happened to Kensingway? His ghost will have vanished from the room, much like the rest of the illusion placed on the room. If we exit the kitchen and enter the throne room once more, we have the door to the party's immediate right, which leads us to this corridor with a staircase leading upwards and connecting with more rooms on the second floor. Otherwise, the room carries another section of ruined carpet which leads up said stairs and to the door on the right, and to the door connecting to the tower. Rooms 54 and 55 are mirrored versions of each other, being so-called corner corridors with not too much in them per se. However, room 55 instead has 2 staircases which form a crest over the metal storage room, which is an alternative means by which to get to the second floor. Rooms 56 through to 59 are the towers on the 4 corners, each consisting of a spiral staircase leading upwards with stopping platforms for each of the floors the castle has. There are some minor differences between each of the towers in terms of design and orientation, however they still serve the same general function of allowing the party to move up and down and explore different floors. And with that, we have now arrived at the last room for the leap year day, February 29. This room is located behind that entrance which is situated beneath the balcony for the throne itself. This room contains a table topped with polished basalt, atop which lie a few scrolls and 2 extremely ornate keys. At the back of the room is a large circular green jade door, with a total of 8 key slots where more keys like the ones on the table would go. If the party examines the scrolls on the tables, they can learn a lot more about the history of Valdereim, specifically its fall and the hopes of those who left long ago. Allow me to summarize what these scrolls have to say. The first scroll details how the city of Valdereim was besieged by a massive army from a hostile nation off to the south, talking at length about how the city prepared for the invasion. It also highlights how they had to resort to a fallback plan involving the Queen of Valdereim, whose name has been weirdly omitted from the scrolls. The fallback plan, in the event the castle grounds were breached, was for the Queen to cast a one-time, widespread spell on the occupants and corpses of Valdereim, to immediately attempt to convert them into undead, in order to get back the necessary numbers to repel the invasion, and further safeguard the castle's vault. The second scroll refers to the specifics of the curse which has now plagued Valdereim. It explains that a side effect of the cast spell is that any undead which have been disposed of will not rise again. It also goes into excruciating detail about the specifics behind the fallback plan spell that was cast, but not how to cast it. The scroll mentions that knowledge is now heavily speculated to be too dangerous, possibly even for the gods, especially since the undead have zealously started defending the city from even the native inhabitants. The last scroll will talk about the new countermeasures to safeguard the vault. The remaining ornate keys have been hidden behind the trials for each of the still-standing arcane towers. The scroll itself makes specific reference to the hope of the writer. They are hoping that the descendants of those who have now fled from Valdereim would someday return to claim the artifacts within the vault for themselves. The scroll also explains that the trials within each tower were once intended as training courses for various skills, with rewards at the end of each trial now including a key required for the vault. In other words, the party can't even get into the vault where presumably all of the best top tier loot that the dungeon has to offer would be. They have to clear the trials in each of the still standing towers dotted around the castle fortifications to get the ornate keys needed to get into the vault. The party could certainly try to brute force the door open, and whilst they can succeed, doing so reveals a solid stone wall behind the door. The keys also serve as the arcane source of power to allow access to the vault. And that's where we finish off February, with a total of 6 mini-dungeons to now design. This does also mean that we need to figure out how to design the towers and their trials in the upcoming months. I came up with the following plan from March until August, with each month focusing on designing rooms for one tower at a time. Once we have finished each of the arcane towers and their trials, we will return to the rest of the castle and the vault the party can then access. That's where we conclude the February episode of Design Floor for 2024. Next time we'll go over the rooms constructed for the Tower of the Blight in the month of March. Thanks for watching the video, mates, and be sure to like and subscribe. Do feel free to leave a comment down below if you have a suggestion on what you might like to see in the dungeon, or even feedback for improving what's been designed here. Again, thanks for watching, mates, and I shall see you all in the video for the rooms designed in March.